join me here at Bolton Station. The Class 769s are some of the most infamous trains currently on our network, and some people have suggested that they are some of Britain's worst trains. Now, I made a video on these trains about 2 or 3 years ago, but I think it's time to revisit these trains now that they're only in service with Northern. In today's video, I'm going to look at the history of these trains, their operations, and the issues that they've encountered. I'm also going to look at what Northern have done more recently to try and improve the operational reliability of these units. Then I'm going to look at the future, what does the future hold for the Class 769s, as well as looking at overall how the Class 769 Flex project has been. Has it been a success or not? So, are they truly Britain's worst trains, or are they just pretty cool trains which don't have great reliability? That's what I'm going to look at in today's video. I've got a train in about 10 minutes. Everything's delayed today because of major issues at Manchester Airport. This train will be a Class 769, but I can't guarantee that every train's going to be a Class 769 because, well, they're not reliable enough, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Firstly though, what were the Class 769s and why have we got them as trains? When Thameslink started retiring their Class 319s in around 2016-17, being replaced by the Class 700s,
we are sorry to announce that
Now the owner of these Class 319s was Porterbrook Rail, and they were like, well, these trains are still in pretty decent nick. Nobody else really wants them because nobody wants purely electric old trains. So why don't we try and come up with something new? Why don't we convert these trains into diesel or diesel electric operation? They were sold as trains which could either fill in as stock gaps because they were PRM modified, so they passed disability regulations, unlike the Pacers, but they were also branded as trains which could fill in the gaps where electrification hadn't quite been finished. And they could also fill in the gaps where electrification hadn't quite been reached yet. Porterbrook thus partnered with Brush, who would convert the units into this new Class 769 Flex project. The units would be specified to customers as a diesel, electric, AC and DC project. The units would receive a MAN 2879 diesel engine under each driving coach, so 2 in total, with power output coming from ABB supplied alternators into existing traction systems via the DC buses. This meant little had to be changed with the actual electrical equipment, whilst also creating a train capable of operating across several different power sources. The conversion, however, did add 7.5 tonnes to each driving trailer, 15 tonnes to the whole train, meaning heating equipment had to be relocated to offset balance. The MAN diesel engines are inline 6 4-stroke turbo diesels with selective catalytic reduction systems for emissions controls, each producing around 520 horsepower with 1,046 total horsepower under diesel operation, with Porterbrook claiming the units would be able to achieve similar acceleration to the Class 150 Sprinters with top speed of 87 miles an hour under diesel, whilst being able to maintain the 100 mile an hour capability under electric power. The units would also be able to switch power modes whilst in motion, with 36 Class 319s converted between 2017 and 2021. Now we've had a brief look at the conversion of these trains, let's take this Class 769 to the first station which we're going to visit, which is Appley Bridge. Hello, here at Appley Bridge. It all got a bit hectic at Bolton. I wasn't expecting that train to come in as soon as it did. So we were talking about how many Class 319s Porterbrook converted. In the end, that number was 36. Of those, there would be the 769-0s and the 769-4s, which would be all diesel or bi-mode with overhead electric power. And then there was the 769-9s, which would be the quote-unquote tri-mode units, which would be diesel and then third rail and overhead electric power. Originally, Northern and Transport for Wales were the only two companies which put forward orders for these trains, with Northern putting in an order for 8 units and Transport for Wales putting an order in for 9 units. The Northern units would use the pantograph. They were used to fill in the gaps of electrification between Southport and Manchester Oxford Road and Manchester Victoria. At the time, Stalybridge Station wasn't electrified, nor was the line up towards Ince. The line was only electrified between Bolton and Manchester Victoria and Manchester Oxford Road. TfW were going to use their 769s to replace old Pacer trains which weren't PRM compliant, as well as able to displace Class 150s and Class 158s to allow them to be refurbished and installed with new PRM compliant toilets. And then also GWR put an order in for their 769-9s, which were going to be used on the Gatwick Airport services. Now, the reason that these were the 769-9s was because the line between Gatwick Airport, which Great Western serves, was going to have overhead lines, it had third rail power, and it had diesel power. And these were going to be the first tri-mode units in the UK, though we'll get onto why that never happened a little bit later. All units were expected to enter service around 2019, but this was significantly delayed. The first 769s made their debut on the Great Central Railway in 2017, and Northern got their hands on their first unit in 2019 for testing in and around the Bolton area. However, it wouldn't be until November 2020 when the first Class 769 would enter service with Transport for Wales, running on the Valley lines. Although they only lasted until May 2023, when the new Class 231s were able to come in and replace the 769s, so they were all gone on the Transport for Wales network by 2023. It wouldn't be until the 17th of May 2021 when the first Northern Class 769 entered service. 769-450 with the 0550 Wigan-Woolgate to Alderley Edge service was the first time a Northern Class 769 carried passengers and successfully changed between diesel to electric power at Bolton Station before heading over on electric power smoothly all the way to Alderley Edge. Nowadays though, the units run here on the Southport line, running between Southport and Stalybridge and Southport and Manchester Oxford Road, no longer going via Manchester Piccadilly like they did over to Alderley Edge previously. So I've still got around 15 minutes here at Apley Bridge, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the reliability of these units and the issues that they've encountered. Firstly, they were only able in the end to run 75 miles an hour under electric power with Northern. This was because the amount of weight of the trains, the extra weight of them, meant that Network Rail were a bit worried that they were going to damage the tracks because of how heavy they were. So they were only capped to 75 miles an hour on both diesel and electric operation. Now, both the Northern and the Transport for Wales units, when they were in service, well, the Northern ones are still in service, but you know what I mean, have suffered from quite a lot of reliability issues with the diesel engines. They've been quite unreliable, especially with the Northern ones when changing over power, either at Bolton Station or more recently due to electrification at Ince Station. There's been quite a lot of issues. I've got them written up here, which Transport for Wales and Northern have both confirmed are issues with the units. Diesel engines failed to start. The units apparently ran out of fuel. Only one engine has started. It's been quite a common problem. They've pantographs failing to lower, that's quite a big problem in Northern, and then they subsequently hit bridges and that damages the pantograph and that puts the units out of service. The trains are also, they're just built off 40-year-old trains. How are you expecting to be able to run a reliable train when the trains are, I think they're 38 years old now, the Class 319 bodies? So, you know, these trains are pretty old, and Porterbrick were like, okay, we're going to use old trains which are already not the most reliable, and we're going to, you know, put some very experimental equipment into them, which no other company, no other rolling stock company has done. So we're going to do that to old units rather than, you know, purpose build some bi-mode trains. The sort of whole concept was a bit flawed, and it was, some people suggest that they were pressured by the government because of the fact that the government was rolling back on electrification programmes. So Porterbrick were like, hang on, we've got a train which can fill in the gaps where you're not electrifying the lines. And the government was like, yes, we'll, you know, give you a grant or something. So there was probably some sort of government pressure to get these trains into service. As well as this, the controls in the cab are pretty useless at telling driver what a fault is. They can't control each engine individually, they can only control both engines at the same time. There's not enough controls in the cab. Their weight, as I sort of mentioned earlier, has been a huge problem. Their diesel acceleration is extremely slow, like quite laughably slow. And Transport for Wales even removed them off the Rumley line operations because of how heavy they were. They just couldn't get up the hills, especially during peak times when there were a lot more passengers aboard, putting even more weight onto the units. With a Transport for Wales meeting held in November 2021, suggesting that they could even remove the units out of service early. But what happened to the Great Western Railway ones? They infamously never entered service. They did undergo testing in the 2020s, but in April 2023 they handed back all of their 19 769s back to Porterbrook. This was because of reliability issues, because of service cuts due to COVID, and also because the DfT cut budgets of the train companies, meaning that GWR just didn't have the money to roll these units into traffic, which meant that the turbos, the 165s and 166s, have had to remain running Gatwick Airport and Red Hill services, which means that services around Bristol haven't got the extra capacity which they were expected to have. So it's been quite a shaky start for the 769s, to say the least. They've been pretty unreliable, and they have been for quite some time one of Britain's most unreliable trains, alongside, in my opinion, probably the Class 230s, which currently operate with Transport for Wales. The main reason for this is probably the fact that they've used the Class 319 bodies, which are already quite old and weren't hugely reliable. Apparently they didn't upgrade the traction motors of the 319s, which meant that they conked out and they had to be replaced or upgraded. So things have not been smooth for the 769s. But with my train heading back towards Manchester, I think I'll go to Ince Station next, or maybe Wigan, depending on timings. Let's, at the next station, look at have there been any recent improvements of the 769s for Northern, which are now the only operator of these trains. Hello, you join me at a pretty nippy and cold Ince station, which has received major upgrade works recently, and we're here to talk about what improvements there have been to the Class 769s. I've left my earpod in. Whoops, oh well. Now, the improvements to reliability there have been improvements. Not a lot, but there have been a few. Now, I was speaking to a guard on a previous train, shout out if you were that guard. But yeah, he was saying that he actually has found the 769s quite reliable since he's taken over duties of them. But he has heard a lot of reports from his colleagues who have said that they're not reliable and they break down, especially here at Ince, because this is where the electrification now ends. Well, I say ends, it continues to Wigan North West, but this is where the 769s change over to diesel power. There's a sign up there reminding drivers, make sure to go to diesel if you're continuing on to Wigan Woolgate and not Wigan North Western. But this electrification works here are brand new. They were only finished in like July of 2025, and this platform here at Ince has been extended. But yeah, the works here are pretty substantial. New road bridge, obviously all of the new catenary. But yeah, quite a big piece of investment, and this is why reliability has sort of increased for the 769 is because they're quite reliable when they're under electric power. And now previously they only went on electric power from Bolton through to Manchester Oxford Road or through to Manchester Victoria, but now the line to Stalybridge and up to here to Ince has been electrified. That's meant that the 769s now run a lot more on electric power, which they are more reliable at, because obviously it's sort of they're much more used to being under electric power, obviously at 319s, and that's sort of that's what they were built for. They were built as electric trains, not diesel ones. So there still are issues changing over to diesel power, but I've been in the Northwest now for a few months. I've been on like 10 769s, I want to say. Every single time I've been on one, it's not broken down, I say that. Some of them have been quite delayed due to faults, but none have been cancelled. Although quite a few trains today have been cancelled due to train crew issues, not because of the trains themselves. So yeah, it's getting better for the 769s, and hopefully reliability will actually get better because the trains all of the northern ones are being overhauled at Kilmarnock. So they're being given a fresh, well, the same livery design, but a fresh new livery, fresh repaint. So they look very shiny. You can tell which ones are the overhauled ones because they have a very shiny yellow front. 769 departs off for Manchester Oxford Road, 769-456 I think, in a very shiny northern livery. I think that might have been one of the ones which has been re-liveried because it's very, unless it's just been cleaned like really recently, it looks very clean and shiny and new almost. So I think that must be, yeah, I think that's definitely the unit which has been overhauled. And they've also been given, I believe, like some overhauls in terms of the traction motors, the engines, the pantograph, all of that has just been given a check over and an overhaul to try and boost reliability. In the meantime, Northern have taken on 2 ex-Transport for Wales units, 769 452 and 421, just had to double check the numbers there. Now these 2 units, I believe 769 421 is on lease until December, so by the time you're watching this, that unit might have left Northern, and that one has been extremely unreliable. So that one I think has only been in service for like a few days and then they've taken it out permanently. But the other one, 452, has been a little bit more reliable and has been working and will be working until January. So they're here with Northern to cover for the 769s which are out of service at the moment. I believe there's like 1 or 2 out of service at a time. So there's currently 10 with the Northern fleet, or 10 technically leased to Northern, although they still will only have 8 at the end of all the overhauls, and they only have 8 or 7 currently in working service, which has sort of been another issue. They don't have enough units, or enough reliable units. I don't actually know how many, somebody will tell me in the comments, but I don't actually know how many trains are needed per day to run on the Southport lines. There's an every half-hour service from Southport, and I don't believe there's enough 769s, or they're not reliable enough to run the service. So you will always find 150s or 156s or old Sprinter units running on Southport services, hence the 150 which I actually took leaving, where was it, Apley Bridge. But I'm not too sure on Northern's plan. Are they trying? I'm not sure if this maintenance work is to try and boost reliability to ensure that they can get as many 769s working as possible and maybe release some more Sprinters to bolster capacity elsewhere, or if this is just to get them over the line and to continue working for the next few years. It's also worth noting that those Transport for Wales units, which I mentioned, have had the pantograph refitted. So when they were working in Wales, they didn't have a pantograph at all. Porterbrook removed the pantograph so that they could run in all pure diesel mode. But these have been put back on, and the changeover systems have been turned back on so they can change between electric and diesel power again. And I believe this is what's causing the issue with one of the units, 76941. So yeah, the reliability has been a little bit better than it was. Right, so I'm going to take a train in the next few minutes from here Ince all the way to Ashton-under-Lyne near Stalybridge, where we can talk about the future of these trains, whilst also concluding about whether the Class 769 Flex project has been a failure or it has been a success. So let's go to Ashton on this 769 in a minute. Are they really Britain's worst trains? I'm not sure. Hello, you join me in the bike shed here at Ashton under Line, which, like Ince, has received major upgrade works recently. The station has been electrified as part of the Transpine route upgrade, so electric trains like the 769s can now come through this station. And well, that was quite a nice journey on the 769 from Ince to here at Ashton. A good 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Journey went pretty smoothly. We were a bit delayed, but the guard was telling me that wasn't due to the train, that was just due to gradual delays at stations, slow boarding, etc. Now though, it is time to look at the future of these trains and sort of a mini conclusion, I guess. Are the 769s really that bad? Firstly though, let's have a look at the future of these trains, because Northern have confirmed that these trains are going to remain in service until their new bi-mode trains go into service within the next 5 to 10 years. A tender has recently gone out for a huge fleet of new diesel electric bi-mode trains, which will replace all the old Sprinters, all the 150s, all the 156s. Sadly, they're all going to be gone in the next, well, I say sadly, they're not great, but it'll be sad to see them go. They've been workhorses here in the Northwest for 40 years, since they've come into service. So the 769s aren't be around for too long with Northern. But then there are some other plans. 2 units have been converted to parcel use. Porterbrook wanted to demonstrate that the trains could be like parcel trains. The Class 321s have been converted into parcel uses by Angel Trains. I believe they're in service with Swift and Veramis, although I believe Veramis suspended their services, but they have been converted and successfully brought into service at some point. And Porterbrook were like, well, we can do the same with our trains and we can make them bi-mode as well. Although I don't believe there's been any takers thus far. There have, however, been 2 potential operators, open access passenger operators, which have suggested using the 769s if they run services. The first one is Go Up, which is a sort of community-owned rail service, which will be operating the Taunton and Weston-super-Mare and Swindon area, I believe. They were originally looking to operate the Class 153s, although they said in a statement that the 153s have been pretty sought after. I don't believe that, but they are only 1 car, and they're probably not the best trains to use in open access configuration. So they've recently said that if they get the funding required, which is £2.5 million, then they will use the Class 769-9s, the ex-Great Western ones. They do have upgrades compared to the 153s. The Great Western 769s have air conditioning, for example, and of course they have the opportunity for bi-mode operation, which Go Up said that it will be used between Swindon and Chippenham, I believe, somewhere between Swindon and where the electrified Great Western Main Line ends. So that could be interesting, although they have only 1 year, Go Up until December 2026, so they have to start running trains before then, or at least be ready to run trains before the December 2026 timetable change, because that is when their track access rights get rescinded and they have to reapply again. And at the moment, it looks as though they aren't going to reach the funding required. The whole point of this model is that they want to get local people to invest into their train service, and that's where they're getting investment from. They're not like this massive company, like Virgin, who are coming in for Eurostar services. Nothing like Virgin. They're a sort of community rail group, and I hope they succeed, but at the moment it's not looking likely, but who knows, maybe somebody will come around and donate enough money for this service to get going. The other open access operator which is potentially looking at 769s for their operations is Alliance Rail, which will run services from Marchwood to Southampton and London Waterloo. Now, Marchwood is currently an abandoned station, which Alliance Rail want to reopen. I'm not sure if Alliance would put the money in for that or if it would be Network Rail. If Marchwood station does open, Alliance Rail will provide an hourly service from Marchwood to Southampton and then provide a few extra services to London Waterloo. And I guess using the 769-9s mean that they could use Third Rail from Southampton through to London, which would be good, I guess, and more environmentally friendly. Although I don't even know if they've confirmed that they would use the Third Rail option. I assume you would, right? But yeah, it would be cool if they did get access grants for that service. They haven't had permission yet from the ORR. I'm not sure they will, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know how much capacity there is on the line between Southampton and Waterloo, and if Network Rail probably wouldn't want to fund the new Marchwood station, especially if they're funding it for a private company. They wouldn't even see any of the money back, really. So I'm not sure they're going to get the green light. But if they do, 769-9s could be used there. So who knows, by 2 or 3 years' time, there could be 3 operators using the Class 769s. However, I have a feeling it will just be Northern, and that'll be it. Northern will keep operating the 769s for the foreseeable future until their new trains come in, and then goodbye 769s, that will be that. So let's sort of conclude here, Ashton, because I am freezing and I've been standing here for about 10 minutes recording. So the 769s, are they really Britain's worst trains? Maybe. I mean, it depends what you count as worst. I'm not going to go through every train in the UK and sort of rank them, because that would take me ages. But potentially the Sprinters, the Class 150s, or the Class 153s, or the Class 156s could be deemed as worse. It depends how you're looking at it. Are we looking at it from a passenger point of view? Because if so, the interior of the 769s is basically the same as the 150s and Sprinters and whatnot. There's not too much different there between the 769s and the 150s. The 156s and 158s have better interiors, but yeah, they're basically the same as the 150s. Or are we looking at it from a reliability point of view? Because then we could look at the Class 230s currently operating in Transport for Wales, which are deeply unreliable for many years and have only recently been relatively reliable. But even then, they're not reliable enough to run the Borderlands line by themselves. They're quite similar trains, the 230s and the 769s. I want to make a video on the 230s as well. But then again, is there even such thing as a worst train? All trains are trains. And if a train is a train, for me personally, that's good enough. I like all trains. I don't think we should be ranking them by worst or best or whatever. Yes, some trains are going to be arguably interior-wise better or whatever, but every train's different as well. You're not going to compare 769 to a Class 390. They're completely different trains. Of course, the Class 390 is a better train to be in, but a Class 390 is never going to run a service from Southport to Stalybridge. And also, it is worth noting that the 769s have sort of succeeded in what they set out to do. The trains were brought in to fill in the gap of electrification between Ince and Southport, and they have done that. If the 769 didn't exist, it would be all diesel operation between Southport and Stalybridge or Manchester. And there would be no electric trains running between Bolton and Ince. So that whole electrification would be practically useless, bar I think there's like 6 trains a day between Wigan, North Western and Manchester Victoria, which use the electrification as well. So they've helped in that sort of sense in trying to improve the lines, because without the 769s, I don't think the line to Ince would have been electrified. So they have succeeded there. And even if the 769-9s never entered service with Great Western, the technology did work. The trains were successful in switching between third rail to overhead line to diesel power. Yes, they weren't reliable enough to enter service, and it wasn't all their fault. Cost constraints, COVID also played a part, but they were successful in that sense. But they're also currently very rare trains. I mean, there's only, 8, 9, 10 units with Northern at the moment, and that is that. They're pretty similar to the 155s in that respect, but the 155s, they're very similar to the 153s, which are in service. They're also just kind of cool because they're basically 319s, which turn into a 150 halfway through their journey. I mean, the whole process of changing between electric to diesel power, it's just quite quirky. As a train enthusiast, I think it's a pretty cool thing. And I know that other trains do that. We have the Great Western trains, the IETs and the Azumas and whatnot. We have trains which go from electric to diesel or battery modes of operation, but having a commuter train which is like 40 years old do that is pretty impressive to me. But yes, of course, they are nowhere near perfect. I personally like them because I'm a train enthusiast, but I think if you're a passenger who gets stuck on a broken down 769, you probably won't be so nice to them. So I don't blame people saying that they are unreliable and bad trains, and we all have our own opinions. So let me know your opinion in the comments below. One thing I would say to make them more reliable is put batteries in them. I know this won't happen now, but if conversion was done in the future, the Class 350-2s for example, we don't know their future, they might run with Northern on the Glossop lines, or Porterbrook have previously said that they could turn them into sort of battery operation. If that was the case, put batteries in them, that would be far more reliable, and if batteries are put in the 769s, they could be far more reliable units. Obviously it won't happen now. We are seeing the rise of battery-powered trains, the Class 230s. Great Western Railway have 230-001, which is currently being tested as a battery train. I don't know if they have any others. I'm not sure if they are like 2 or 3 units, but they definitely have a 230, which is running battery services on the Greenford branch, not in passenger use yet, but will be soon, hopefully. And that is, I think that is the future. Battery operation is the future. Northern's new trains, I think, are going to be battery bi-mode trains, which will be very interesting to see. And the likes of Chiltern are also looking at battery bi-mode trains. But yeah, battery is the future. I think the 769s it was an experiment. Porterbrook went out there and did something new, and we don't really see that. It was innovative. And they've done that with the Class 799s, the hydrogen trains. So you have to respect Porterbrook there, for at least they're trying something new. It hasn't really worked out how many thought it might do, but alas, not everything is perfect in the rail industry. So are the Class 769s really Britain's worst train? For me, no, but for you, maybe they are. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you have enjoyed this video though. If so, do smash like, subscribe, and potentially even check out my channel membership or Patreon membership in the links in the description below if you want to support my channel even further. Also, do join my Discord server, it's free, link in the description below. Make sure to follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky, and I'm gonna go and find a waiting room because I'm freezing, so I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. And a huge thanks to my YouTube and Patreon members, including First Class members Aaron Barry, Crispin Mickey, and JBNEL. Business Zone members Andrew Bowen, Anthony Harris, Anthony James Moore, ARK, Connor Gregg, Clive's Travelling Trains, Craig Mitchell 43, Daniel Burford, Dave CDF, Gordon Walker, J Teco, Lewis C21, NJTE, Real, Scott Wheeler, That Transport Girl, Train Life GB, and Will Ho, as well as all my Standard Premium and Standard Class members. You can get your name on this list from as little as £2.99 a month, or support me from as little as 99p a month. All your support really does help, so thank you very much. By becoming a member, you get access to exclusive perks, such as early access to all my videos and member-only exclusive videos. So why not consider joining if you like my content? Thank you. Once again, thanks for watching. Check out my Discord server, Twitter, and Blue Sky in the links in the description below, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.